Caleb Marrow should have shut the door. He should have let the law take them. Snow tore sideways across the yard when he stepped into the storm and heard a sound that did not belong to cattle or wind. A baby's breath breaking in short, wet pulls. 5 shapes huddled in his barn. One of them was dying. By sunrise, the town would call it kidnapping. By sundown, they would come with papers and fire, and he carried them inside anyway. What followed was not mercy, but debt. A creak that smelled like metal, a woman who spoke too carefully, a boy who repeated the same sentence twice, and a name stamped on every red seal crown. Caleb would lose his house, then his land, then his good name, trading each for time while the children learned how to stand without lying. He signed away everything to buy 24 hours. The trouble was this: the water ledger shows the poison arrived after the first cattle died. Stay with this story to the end. Subscribe, watch all the way through, and tell us, what city are you watching from? The wind hit the barn door like a fist. Caleb Marrow had one boot half-laced when the sound threaded through the blizzard. Thin, wrong, not wood settling or a mule snorting, but something smaller. Something that didn't belong out there. He grabbed the oil lantern off its nail and shoved into the storm. Snow slapped his face raw. The flame inside the glass danced, then steadied, throwing a warm circle that the night tried to swallow. Another sound, closer now. A cough that ended in a wet hitch. Caleb leaned into the wind and pushed through the drifted path to the barn. The door was half buried. He set his shoulder to it. The latch creaked. The wood groaned. He shoved harder. The barn gave a sudden inch, and cold poured out, as if the place had been holding its breath. Lantern light fell over hay bales and tack racks and the dark shapes of stalls. Then it caught on movement. 5. Not calves, not coyotes. Children. They were jammed into a corner behind a stack of feed sacks, bundled in rags and mismatched coats, faces pale under crusted snow. One boy stood in front of them like a fence post, thin as wire and shaking from more than the cold. He held a broken plank two-handed, ready to swing. "Stay back," the boy snapped, voice rough like he'd swallowed smoke. Caleb didn't lift his rifle. He didn't move fast. He set the lantern down in the dirt so the flame wouldn't kiss the hay and turn the whole barn into a funeral pyre. His hands stayed open. "Easy," he said. "You're freezing in here." Behind the boy, a woman shifted, dragging the smallest bundle tighter against her chest. The lantern light caught the edge of a gold spectacle frame. One arm snapped and tied on with cloth. It caught the tremor in her fingers. It caught the baby's mouth, blue at the edges, barely opening. Caleb's gaze locked on the bundle. "That one breathing?" The woman didn't answer. Her chin lifted like a challenge. Her eyes were sharp, educated eyes that didn't match the broken barn and the feed sacks. She angled her body so he couldn't see the baby fully. The boy's plank quivered. "Don't you call nobody." Caleb took one step, slow. The boy jerked the plank up. Caleb stopped. He crouched in the dirt instead, close enough to see the baby's chest. It rose, fell, rose again, shallow and fast, like it was running out of rooms. "You want him alive," Caleb said. "Then you come inside. Now." The boy barked a laugh that turned into a cough. "We ain't going back." "I didn't say back." Caleb's voice stayed flat. He kept it that way because anything soft in his throat wanted to crack. I said inside. The woman's breath came out in white bursts. The baby made a sound like paper tearing. Caleb stripped off his coat before his mind could argue. He stepped forward, slid it across the dirt, and stopped again. Put him in that. I'll carry him. You carry the others. We do this fast. The boy's eyes darted to the lantern, to Caleb's hands, to the barn door like he was calculating distance, the way men did before trouble. Lucas? One of the smaller girls whispered. The name snapped the boy's attention back. He didn't lower the plank, but he didn't swing either. The woman hesitated one heartbeat too long, then shifted the baby into the coat. The baby's head lolled. The woman's jaw tightened as if she was biting down on fear with her back teeth. Caleb moved in, swift now. He lifted the bundle against his chest, tucking it under his shirt so the baby's cheek touched skin and not winter air. The baby's breath hit him in shallow puffs. I should have walked away. The thought was there and gone before he could hold it, like the flame of the lantern when the wind caught it. He turned. Move! The woman stood, pulling 3 more children up by their elbows. 2 girls and a boy, faces blotched red and white from cold. Their boots were wrapped with rope and cloth. Their sleeves were too short. One girl's hair was braided tight, like somebody once cared enough to keep it neat. Lucas backed toward the door, plank up, still watching Caleb. Put that down, Caleb said. Lucas didn't. You call anyone, we run. Caleb shoved the barn door open with his hip. The storm pounced at once, ripping heat from skin. You run out there, you'll be snow by morning, he said. Keep up. They moved, heads down, hunched like old men. Caleb took the lead, lantern in his left hand, baby tight to his chest with his right forearm. He kicked a path through the drift, each step sinking, each breath a knife. Behind him, the woman stumbled once, caught herself on the fence rail, and kept going without a sound. She didn't beg. She didn't thank him. She just pushed the children forward with her shoulder and her elbow like she'd been doing it for miles. A shadow crossed the far ridge of the pasture. Maybe a tree, bending. Maybe something else. Caleb didn't stop to look. He remembered how the winter hid things and how some men used that. The cabin door banged under his fist. He shouldered it open. Heat slapped their faces. The stove fire was low, but it was there. Caleb kicked the door shut behind them and crossed straight to the hearth. He crouched, set the baby down on a folded blanket near the stove. Not too close, not far enough to lose warmth. The baby's lips were still blue. The chest still ran too fast. Caleb's hands moved without asking permission. He filled a kettle. He shoved wood into the stove. He struck flint. Flame caught. The room brightened. He pulled down a tin cup and a crock of milk that had half frozen into a slush. Sit, he barked at the children. Right there, back to the stove. They obeyed because cold makes obedience out of pride. Lucas didn't sit. He hovered, eyes locked on Caleb's hands. Caleb warmed the milk by setting the tin cup inside a pot of hot water. He took a clean cloth and dabbed the baby's mouth. The baby's tiny hand snagged his thumb with weak fingers and held like it was afraid to let go. The woman sank to her knees beside the baby, her breath ragged now that she'd stopped moving. She pulled off her gloves. No, not gloves, just wrapped cloth, and her fingers were red and cracked. Caleb glanced up. Name, The woman's eyes flicked to the window, to the dark outside. "Evelyn," she said, as if giving him only the peace he could have. "Evelyn Hartwell." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Don't ask her nothing else." Caleb didn't argue. He handed Evelyn the warm cup. "Feed him slow," he said. "If he chokes, he dies." Evelyn's grip steadied when she took the cup, like her hands trusted instructions more than kindness. She tipped the milk to the baby's lips. The baby latched, weak at first, then with a hungry pull that made his throat work. One of the girls started to cry without sound, shoulders shaking, face pressed into her sleeve. Caleb slid a plate of hard bread across the table and cut thin slices of salt pork. "Eat," he said. "Small bites. Don't you go sick on me." They ate like wolves, careful and fast. Lucas watched the door, the windows, the stove, the lantern. He watched Caleb. Caleb caught the boy's gaze. "Why are you in my barn on Christmas Eve?" Lucas swallowed. He looked at the baby, then away. "'Cause if we stayed on the road, Noah was gonna die." The name landed heavy. Noah. Caleb's throat tightened. He looked past Evelyn's shoulder to the window. Two mounds out back rose under snow, white humps with boards stuck in them. The sight was a hook that snagged him in the ribs every day. Evelyn followed his gaze. She didn't ask. She just lowered her eyes and kept feeding Noah, one measured sip at a time. Lucas spoke again, voice lower now. "We ain't thieves." "I didn't say you were," Caleb answered. "We're orphans?" One of the smaller kids blurted, almost like a practiced line. "We ain't got nobody." Lucas shot the child a look that shut him up. Caleb wiped his hands on his pants. "Orphans don't usually travel with a lady who reads like a school teacher," he said. Evelyn's chin lifted a fraction. "I can sew, I can cook, I can work." Caleb nodded once as if that was the only language he trusted. "You can keep them alive," he said. "That's all that matters right now." The wind rattled the shutters. Then, faint through the storm, a sound that didn't belong to weather. Hoofbeats, distant, measured. Lucas froze mid-bite. Evelyn's hand tightened around the cup so hard the tin creaked. Caleb moved to the window without thinking. He lifted the curtain edge with 2 fingers. A shape passed the far fence line, dark against white, then gone. No shout, no call. Just a rider sliding through the night like a question. Caleb dropped the curtain and went to the lantern. He turned the wick down until the flame was a low glow. He didn't kill it. He needed light if things got ugly. Lucas whispered, raw as gravel. "Don't." Caleb looked at him. "Don't what?" "Don't send us back." Lucas's eyes were wide, hard, pleading without the word. "They'll split us up. Put us on that orphan train come morning. They'll take Noah. They'll take Elena. They'll take all of us and scatter us like feed." Evelyn didn't speak. She just reached into her coat and pulled out a thin strip of red thread tied around Noah's wrist, tight enough to stay, loose enough not to cut. Her thumb pressed it once like a promise. Caleb's jaw flexed. He walked to the door and slid the bolt into place with a hard click that sounded like a choice. Outside, the hoofbeats faded, then returned, circling wider. Caleb set his palm flat on the door, feeling the cold seep through the wood. "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said. Lucas held his breath. "You swear?" Caleb didn't swear easy. He glanced at the small Christmas sprig pinned above the mantel, dried greenery, a scrap of ribbon his wife once hung there. He hadn't touched it since the ground froze the first year after. His voice came out low. "If the Lord put you in my barn on Christmas Eve," he said, "then I reckon he expects me to keep you breathing till morning." He turned back to the room. "You tell me the truth in daylight," he said. "You lie to me in the dark, and it'll bury us all. Understood?" Lucas nodded once, stiff. Evelyn's eyes met Caleb's over Noah's head. One sharp glance, then she looked away, as if the act of being seen cost too much. From the stove, Noah's breathing hitched, then steadied. Caleb listened to it like it was a clock. Outside, the night kept moving. Somewhere beyond the snow, somebody counted houses. Somebody carried paper with a red seal. Caleb reached up and lifted the lantern, the old habit in his left hand, and stood where the door could not open without touching him first. Morning came thin and gray, like it was ashamed to show its face. Caleb was awake before the stove cooled. He fed it wood, slow and steady, listening to the cabin breathe. The wind had backed off in the night, but the cold stayed. It always did. Noah slept in fits on the pallet near the hearth. Each breath counted itself. Caleb counted with it. Evelyn sat with her back to the wall, boots off, stockings drying on a chair rung. She'd slept sitting up, head tipped back, one hand never leaving the baby's chest. When Noah stirred, her fingers moved before her eyes opened. Lucas stood watch by the window. He'd scratched a circle clear in the frost and kept his eye there, jaw set. The other children huddled close to the stove, sharing heat and crumbs. Caleb poured water from the kettle into a basin. "We eat," he said. "Then we go." Lucas didn't look away from the window. "Go where?" "Town." That got his attention. "No." Caleb met the boy's eyes. "I'm not hiding you in a cabin with one door," he said. "Not with riders sniffing fences. We walk in daylight. We talk to the law." Evelyn's voice came quiet. "The law already knows us." Caleb didn't turn. "Then it can hear you say it." They ate in silence. Bread, pork, a thin scrape of apple butter saved for Sundays. Noah took warm milk and kept it down. His color came back slow, like dawn. Caleb pulled on his coat and strapped on his rifle. He paused, then left the rifle on the peg. He took the lantern instead. Old habits mattered. They stepped out together. Snow squeaked under boots. Smoke crawled from the chimney like it was reluctant to leave. The road into town cut through open ground. No trees to hide in. No bends to duck behind. Caleb put himself on the outside of the group, eyes moving. He felt the land watching him back. Halfway in, they passed a fence post with fresh tracks beside it. Horse. Shod. Not farm work. Lucas saw it too. He said nothing. Town sat low against the sky. A line of roofs. A church spire. The boarding house with its crooked sign. People moved slow, collars up, eyes quick. Ada Klein's place smelled like stew and wet wool. She took one look at the children and didn't ask questions she didn't want answers to. "Sit," she said, already ladling. "You look like the night chewed on you." Caleb slid a coin across the counter. Ada pushed it back. "I'll take payment in not bringing trouble to my door." Lucas's shoulders loosened a notch. They ate. Again, faster this time. Hunger didn't ask permission. Ada leaned in, voice low. "Crown men were riding before light," she said. "Two of 'em. Asking after a woman with spectacles and children who don't belong." Evelyn's hand stilled on Noah's blanket. Caleb asked, "Deputy?" Ada tilted her head. "Rojas, if he's sober." Rojas was sober. He stood outside the small office with his hat pulled low, reading the sky like it might hand him answers. Caleb didn't waste time. "I need to talk." Rojas took in the group. The baby, the faces, the mud on boots. He sighed. "You brought trouble to town." Caleb nodded. "Trouble found me first." Inside, the office was cold. Papers lay stacked neat, weighted with a stone. Rojas picked one up and turned it so Caleb could see. Red seal, clean edges. "Guardianship order," Rojas said. "Judge Boone signed it yesterday." Evelyn leaned forward. "On what grounds?" Rojas met her eyes. "Legal ones." Caleb felt the words land heavy. He read the paper. Names, dates, the stamp that made men obey. Lucas spoke up. "She's lying." Rojas looked at him. "Son, she's lying," Lucas said again, louder. "She killed our pa. Took the water, took everything." The room went still. Rojas rubbed his jaw. "That's a hard claim." "It's true," Lucas said. His eyes didn't waver. "She pushed him by Miller's Ridge. He fell. They said it was an accident." Rojas asked, "When?" Lucas answered. The date slid out clean. Rojas's brow creased, just a hair. He glanced at the paper again. "You sure?" Lucas nodded too fast. Caleb saw it. A small thing. A hitch. The way truth sometimes wore the wrong coat. "I lied." The words hit Caleb and were gone, like a blade sliding back into a sheath. He kept his face still. Rojas cleared his throat. "Crown owns the creek now," he said. "On paper." "Paper can burn," Caleb said. Rojas's mouth twitched. "So can men." Outside, boots scraped. Voices. The door opened without knocking. Matilda Crown filled the frame like she owned it. Black coat, gloves, a ruby on her finger that caught the light and kept it. "Deputy," she said, smooth. "You have my property." Her eyes slid to the children, to Evelyn. They stopped on Caleb. "Mr. Marrow," she said, "you've had a cold night." Caleb didn't move. "Get out of my way." Matilda smiled without teeth. "Legally," she said, "they're coming with me." She laid another paper on the desk, another seal, another line men died over. "Sundown," she said, "or I sign a warrant." Rojas looked between them. Sweat gathered at his temple. Caleb spoke slow. "You know what happens if you take them." Matilda's head tipped. "Order returns." Evelyn stepped forward. "You'll kill the baby." Matilda glanced at Noah. "If he dies," she said, "that will be unfortunate." Caleb's hand clenched. He didn't raise it. Matilda turned to go. "Sundown," she said again, as if it were a kindness. She left with her men. The door closed. The seal on the paper bled red into Caleb's vision. Outside, people had gathered. Not close. Close enough to see. Rojas exhaled. "I can give you hours," he said. "Not days." Caleb nodded. "I need water tested." Rojas hesitated. "Why?" Caleb didn't look at Evelyn. "Because paper isn't her only weapon." They moved fast. Church first. Amos Quinn opened the door with a limp and a look that said he'd been waiting for this kind of trouble all his life. "Sanctuary," Amos said, and stepped aside. Inside, the church smelled of old wood and candle wax. Caleb shut the door and slid the bolt home. Outside, a bell tolled once. Somewhere, a rider turned his horse. Lucas leaned against a pew, breathing hard. He looked at Caleb. "I told you the truth." Caleb nodded. "You told me what kept you alive." Evelyn's hands shook as she settled Noah near the altar, the red thread bright against pale skin. She looked up at the cross, then away. The wind pressed against the walls. The day thinned toward afternoon. Caleb stood between the door and the children, lantern in hand, and watched the light shift. Sundown was coming. The church held its breath. Light crept through the high windows in thin bands, dust turning in it like slow snow. Caleb fed the stove with careful hands, keeping the fire low. Too much heat drew attention. Too little killed babies. Noah's breathing stuttered, then found a rhythm. Caleb counted it without moving his lips. Evelyn washed cloths in a basin near the altar. Her motions were precise, economical. She wrung water out, folded, stacked. The broken arm of her spectacles was tied again with fresh twine, neat as a stitch. She didn't look at Caleb when she spoke. "They won't wait," she said. Caleb set another stick of wood in place. "They never do." Lucas paced the aisle, heel to toe, heel to toe. He stopped whenever the door creaked under a gust. The other children sat tight together, backs straight, hands in laps like they'd been taught a lesson that couldn't be unlearned. Amos Quinn came from the back room with a kettle and a sack of oats. His limp pulled at each step, but he didn't slow. "I sent the wire," he said. "Marshal office up north. Could take a day. Could take longer." "Day's enough," Caleb said. Amos looked at the children. "If the Lord wills." Caleb didn't answer. He took the kettle and warmed milk again, testing the rim with his finger before handing it to Evelyn. She fed Noah slow. The baby swallowed, coughed once, then kept it down. Color climbed his cheeks like it had somewhere to go. Lucas watched every movement. "You gonna hand us over when the bell rings?" he asked. Caleb didn't turn. "No." Lucas swallowed. "You swear." Caleb glanced at the cross above the altar. "I don't swear," he said. "I stand." Outside, voices drifted. A laugh. Boots on boards. The sound of a town pretending it wasn't waiting. Evelyn finished feeding Noah and tucked the red thread back into place on his wrist. She rose and moved toward Lucas, stopping just short of touching him. "Say it again," she said, low. Lucas stiffened. "What?" "The part that matters," Evelyn said. "Just that." Lucas hesitated. He looked at Caleb, then at the door. He took a breath. "She took the water," he said. "Crown. She took it on paper, then she made the well bad. Our pa said it smelled like metal. Cows went down first. Good, Evelyn said. And the ridge. Lucas frowned. We don't... Leave it, Evelyn cut in. Don't add what you didn't see. Caleb's jaw set. He kept his back turned. I lied. The thought burned and passed. Boots stopped outside. A knock followed, polite as a lie. Amos moved toward the door. Caleb stepped into his path. Wait! The knock came again. Pastor? A voice called. Just talk. Caleb slid the bolt an inch and leaned in. Cold rushed the crack. He saw torchlight and faces held back by hats. Matilda Crown stood at the edge of the light, gloves on, smile ready. Sanctuary doesn't change the law, she said. Caleb said nothing. You're sheltering stolen property, Matilda went on. And a woman wanted for fraud. Evelyn's head lifted at that. Her face stayed still. Caleb spoke. You've got paper, he said. So do I. Matilda's eyes flicked to the lantern. You have fire, she said. That's all. She stepped closer. The ruby flashed. Sundown, she said, softer now. After that, I won't be so patient. She turned away. Torches moved with her. The crowd shifted like a tide that hadn't decided which way to run. Caleb slid the bolt home. Silence fell hard. Lucas let out the breath he'd been holding. They gonna come in? Yes, Caleb said. But not yet. He crossed to the pew and sat. He laid the lantern on the floor, between his boots, and took out his knife. He began to sharpen it, slow, steady strokes. The sound filled the space where fear wanted to talk. Evelyn watched him. You know, she said, that part about the ridge. I know, Caleb said. He didn't look up. She waited. If they ask again, I'll answer, Caleb said, when it helps. Evelyn nodded once. She went back to the basin. The bell tolled outside. Once. Twice. Lucas's shoulders went tight. He glanced at the children, then back to Evelyn. You said it'd work. Evelyn met his eyes. It will keep you together, she said. That's what it's for. That ain't the same, Lucas said. It is when you're small, Evelyn said. The door shuddered under a fist. Voices rose. Amos moved toward the door, Bible in hand. Caleb stood and lifted the lantern. He opened the door a hand's width. Matilda's face filled the gap. Time, she said. Caleb stepped out onto the church steps. The cold took him whole. He stood where the crowd could see him, lantern low, light cutting a circle in the snow. You want them, he said. Come daylight, you can talk to a federal marshal. Laughter rippled. Judge Boone cleared his throat. Deputy Rojas is occupied, he said, and you are obstructing justice. Caleb looked at Boone. You sign what she puts in front of you. Boone flushed. Matilda raised a hand. Enough, she said. This ends now. She nodded. Two men moved forward. Caleb lifted the lantern higher. You step past me, he said. You do it knowing you'll have to drag me. The men hesitated. Eyes went to the lantern, to the knife at Caleb's belt, to the door behind him. From inside, Noah cried. A thin sound that cut through the cold. The crowd shifted. Someone swore. A woman covered her mouth. Matilda's smile thinned. You're hurting him, she said. Caleb didn't answer. He stood. Amos stepped beside him, cross in hand. This house is open, he said. Not to theft. Matilda's eyes hardened. Sundown, she said again. Last. She turned away. The torches followed. Caleb went back inside and shut the door. He leaned his forehead against the wood for a second, then straightened. Evelyn stood close. They'll try another way, she said. Yes, Caleb said. He went to Lucas. He crouched so they were eye to eye. Listen, he said. If anyone asks you about the ridge again. Lucas bristled. I told you. I know, Caleb said. And you told it the way you were taught. I'm not blaming you. Lucas blinked. Then what? Then you don't add, Caleb said. You don't guess. You say what you saw and no more. Lucas nodded, stiff. Evelyn watched the exchange. Her mouth tightened. She reached into her coat and pulled out folded paper, a piece of music, creased and worn. She smoothed it once, then tucked it away again. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow began to fall, light and steady. Caleb moved chairs, blocked windows, stacked wood by the stove. He set watches. Lucas by the door, Amos by the side window. He took the last himself. Hours passed like slow water. Near dusk, a shout went up down the street. Hooves pounded. A rider tore past the church, not stopping. Caleb's eyes followed the sound. He felt it then, the pull, the turn, the way fights changed shape before they broke. Evelyn came to him, voice low. If it comes to it, she said, you let them take me. Caleb shook his head. No. They won't touch the children if they have me, she said. Caleb met her gaze. They'll touch whoever lets them. She didn't argue. She looked past him at the door, then down at Noah. She adjusted the red thread again. The bell tolled. Sundown. Caleb lifted the lantern and stood where the door would open into him. He felt the heat of the flame and the cold of the wood at the same time. Outside, boots gathered. Inside, Noah breathed. Caleb waited. The knock came before the bell. Not a fist this time. Knuckles. Careful. The sound a man used when he wanted witnesses. Caleb didn't move. He held the lantern low and let the flame breathe. Noah slept in fits near the altar, the red thread bright against pale skin. Evelyn stood with her back to the wall, hands folded, eyes fixed on the door. Lucas had planted himself 2 steps behind Caleb, jaw set. The knock came again. Mr. Marrow, a woman's voice said, we can do this properly. Caleb slid the bolt an inch. Cold rushed in, carrying perfume cut with metal. He saw Matilda Crown's face, clean and composed, framed by black wool. 2 men flanked her. Another stood back with a leather case tucked to his chest. Morning, she said, like it was any other day. I brought papers. Caleb said nothing. She angled the case toward him. The man opened it. Red seals caught the lantern light. Wax, ink, order. Guardianship, Matilda said. Warrant, and a note from Judge Boone regarding obstruction. Caleb glanced past her, down the steps. A cluster of townsfolk stood at a distance, pretending to talk to each other, pretending not to watch. You ride early, Caleb said. I don't like delays, Matilda replied, especially when property is involved. From behind Caleb, Lucas breathed in sharp. Evelyn's fingers tightened together once, then relaxed. Caleb asked, "What's the hurry?" Matilda's eyes flicked to the altar, to the baby. "Children don't belong in churches," she said. "It upsets people." Caleb leaned closer to the crack. "You upset people." She smiled. "Only when they owe me." She slid a paper forward. "By sundown yesterday, you were to deliver the children. You didn't. That makes you a criminal." Caleb read the date, the time, the seal. "You knew the storm would hold us." "I knew winter," Matilda said. "Winter always collects debts." Caleb's hand tightened on the lantern handle. "You'll kill the baby if you move him." Matilda's head tipped, a fraction. "If he dies," she said again, "it will be unfortunate." Caleb shut the door. The latch rang like a shot. Inside, the church went still. Lucas let out a breath he hadn't meant to hold. "She's lying," Lucas said. "She can't take us." Caleb turned. "She can," he said. "On paper." Evelyn stepped forward. "Then we don't fight paper with words." Caleb nodded once. "We don't." Amos limped from the back room, face tight. "They're gathering," he said, quiet-like. Caleb moved fast. He shifted benches, stacked hymnals to block the side windows. He set the lantern down where its light fell wide and low, not sharp. He checked Noah's breathing. Counted. Again. From outside came the scrape of boots, then a cough, then a voice. Judge Boone's, thin and official. "Mr. Marrow," Boone called. "Open the door." Caleb opened it enough to show his face. Boone stood with Matilda now, hands clasped, cheeks red with cold. "You're obstructing lawful orders," Boone said. "Stand aside." Caleb looked at Boone's eyes. He saw the tremor there, the kind that came from signing things you didn't want to read. "You sign what she hands you," Caleb said. Boone flushed. "Mind your tongue." Matilda lifted a gloved finger. "We're wasting daylight," she said. "Deputy Rojas is on his way. He'll enforce." Caleb knew that wasn't true. Not yet. He didn't say it. From inside, a child coughed. Another sniffed back tears. Matilda raised her voice, gentle and loud enough to carry. "I am offering mercy," she said. "Mr. Marrow has debts. I will forgive them if he does the right thing." A murmur ran the crowd. Caleb felt it like pressure in his chest. He thought of the ledger at home, the numbers, the dates. "I won't trade children for paper," he said. Matilda's eyes hardened. "Then you'll lose both." She turned to go. Boone followed. The men with her stayed a beat longer, eyes on Caleb's hands, then moved away. The crowd didn't scatter. It lingered. Like smoke. Caleb shut the door and slid the bolt. He leaned his shoulder into it, just for a second. "I should have taken the deal." The thought came unbidden. He pushed it away like a hand reaching for a hot stove. Evelyn was at his side. "She'll try another angle," she said. "She always does," Caleb replied. The angle came with fire. Near noon, a shout went up outside the church. Someone ran past the windows. Then the smell hit, sharp and wrong. Smoke. Caleb was at the door before his mind caught up. He opened it, and the sound rushed in, crackling, popping, the hungry breath of flame. His house was burning. The roof sagged in on itself, sending a plume of black into the gray sky. Fire chewed the porch. Snow hissed and vanished where embers landed. Caleb stood on the steps and watched the place where he'd buried his wife and child vanish behind smoke. Behind him, Evelyn caught her breath. Lucas swore once under his breath like a papu twice his age. Matilda stood at the edge of the crowd, far enough to be clean. She didn't look at the fire. She looked at Caleb. "Accidents happen," she said. Caleb didn't move. He felt the cold go hollow inside him. Amos touched his sleeve. "Son." Caleb turned back into the church. He closed the door. The latch clicked. "Listen," he said to the children. "No one leaves this room." Lucas nodded, face pale. Caleb went to the altar and knelt. He pressed his palm to the wood, feeling the grain. He breathed once, twice. Then he stood. "They took my house," he said. "They won't take you." Evelyn's voice shook just a little. "They'll come harder now." "Yes," Caleb said. "So will we." He went to the back room with Amos. Amos opened a small chest bound with iron. Inside lay papers wrapped in cloth. Old deeds, letters, ledgers left for safekeeping by men who trusted a church more than a town. Caleb lifted one bundle. "Water rights," he said. Amos nodded. "Some." Caleb handed them to Evelyn. "Read." She unfolded, eyes moving quick. Names, creaks, signatures that matched Matilda's style. Clean, careful, predatory. "They poisoned the well," Evelyn said softly. "That's how they forced sales." Caleb felt the shape of the fight change. Outside, boots came fast. The door rattled. Caleb stepped forward. He opened it a crack. A man stood there in a marshal's coat. Tall, clean-shaven, a badge that shone too bright. "Federal," the man said. "You're under arrest." Caleb's eyes flicked to the badge, to the man's boots. New, no snow scuff. Rojas wasn't here. Caleb said, "On whose authority?" The man smiled. "Mine." Behind him, Matilda watched. Caleb didn't argue. He turned and held his hands out. Lucas stepped forward. "Don't." Caleb met his eyes. "Stay with the others." The man snapped cuffs on Caleb's wrists. Metal bit skin. Evelyn moved fast. She stepped between the man and the children. "You touch them," she said, "and every witness in this town hears what I know." Matilda laughed once. "You know nothing that matters." Evelyn reached into her coat. She pulled out a folded paper and struck a match from the altar candle. The flame caught. Caleb saw it then. The seal. The chance. The paper that could have bought him free. Evelyn held it until the fire climbed, then dropped it into the basin. Wax ran. Ink bled. Caleb watched it burn. She met his gaze. "I chose," she said. The paper died. The flame went out. The man in the marshal's coat tugged Caleb forward. "Time." Caleb walked. He didn't fight. He didn't look back until the door closed. Inside, Noah cried. Outside, the fire died down to embers. Matilda turned away at last. Caleb stood in the cold with iron on his wrists and watched the smoke thin. The fight had changed, and it had only just begun. The cuffs cut when Caleb moved. They walked him down the church steps and into the street, where the snow had been packed flat by boots and waiting. The man in the marshal's coat kept one hand on Caleb's arm, firm but careful, like he didn't want bruises anyone could point to later. Matilda Crown stayed back. She always did. Power didn't need to hurry. "Keep him warm," she said, as if Caleb were a tool that could crack in the cold. "I need him standing." The marshal nodded and steered Caleb toward the office. The town watched from doorways and windows, eyes bright with the safety of distance. Caleb walked. He counted his steps. He counted his breaths. He did not look at the smoke still lifting from where his house had been. "I can still fix this." The thought came and went. He let it go. Inside the office, the air was stale. The marshal unlocked the cuffs just long enough to shove Caleb onto a bench, then snapped them back on. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Name," the marshal said. "Caleb Marrow." The man wrote it down slow, too slow. "Occupation." "Farmer." The man smiled thin. "Former." The door opened. Deputy Javier Rojas stepped in, snow on his shoulders, jaw tight. He stopped when he saw the cuffs, when he saw the marshal. "That's not my man," Rojas said. The marshal didn't turn. "Federal business." Rojas looked at the badge again. Too bright. Too clean. He said nothing, but his eyes flicked to Caleb. Caleb shook his head once. Not yet. Rojas set a bundle on the desk. A bottle wrapped in cloth. "Water sample," he said. "From Crown's lower well." Matilda appeared in the doorway like she'd been called by name. "Deputy," she said. "You're overreaching." Rojas didn't look at her. He unwrapped the bottle. The liquid inside was clear, innocent-looking. He held it to the light. "Smells like metal," he said. Matilda's smile didn't move. "Old pipes." Rojas nodded. "Maybe." He turned to the marshal. "I need him for questioning." The marshal shrugged. "He's mine." Matilda raised a hand. "Enough," she said. "We're wasting time." She stepped closer to Caleb. "You're tired," she said softly. "You've lost your house. Your debts remain. This can end clean." Caleb looked up at her. "You poisoned the creek." Matilda sighed. "Words," she said. "Always words." She slid a paper onto the desk. The seal was red, fresh. "Sign," she said. "Transfer the remaining rights. I give you 24 hours. Rojas stiffened. "You can't." Matilda cut him off with a glance. "I can." Caleb stared at the paper. The lines swam. He saw the church door, the red thread on Noah's wrist, Lucas's face when the cuffs snapped shut. 24 hours was a lifetime. "What happens if I don't?" Caleb asked. Matilda's voice stayed smooth. "The children move tonight." Rojas swore under his breath. Caleb closed his eyes once. He opened them and took the pen. The ink froze halfway through the stroke. He breathed on it and finished. The paper slid back to Matilda. She took it like a gift. Rojas snatched a scrap of charcoal and rubbed it over the page, lifting a ghost of the signature. He folded it and tucked it away without a word. Matilda turned to go. You have your hours, she said. Use them wisely. The marshal unlocked the cuffs and stepped back. You walk, he said. Caleb did. They left the office together. Caleb, Rojas, the cold. The street had thinned. News traveled faster than mercy. Rojas spoke low. Dr. Pike's waiting. They crossed to a small room that smelled of alcohol and soap. Pike stood over a table, spectacles low, hands steady. He took the bottle, uncorked it, dipped a strip, watched it change. Arsenic, Pike said. Enough to kill cattle, enough to sicken people. Rojas nodded. Write it. Pike did. Outside, a bell rang once, then again. The church. Caleb turned before he thought. He ran. He didn't feel the cold. He didn't feel the loss. He felt the pull. At the church, the door was open. Amos stood inside, pale. They tried the children, he said. Men at the side window. Evelyn sent them away with words. Caleb moved past him. Evelyn stood by the altar, shoulders squared. Noah slept in her arms, the red thread bright. Lucas stood in front of them, empty hands up, daring anyone to take a step. They'll be back, Lucas said, with more. Yes, Caleb said, but not with paper. He crossed to Evelyn. He kept his voice low. I bought us a day. Her eyes searched his face. She saw what it cost. She nodded once. Then we use it. Outside, snow began again, light and steady. Caleb took the lantern and hung it where the light would reach the door and the faces that came with it. He stood in its glow and waited, knowing the water would speak. It always did. The knock this time wasn't careful. It came as a shove, wood flexing under weight. A shoulder tested the door, then another. Caleb didn't flinch. He stood where the door would open into him, lantern low, light spilling across the floor like a warning line. Stay back, he said, not loud. He didn't need to be. Lucas herded the younger ones behind the altar, bodies tight together, hands on sleeves. He didn't look at them. He watched the door. Evelyn moved to Amos's side. She set the basin closer to the flame and checked Noah's breathing again. Counted again. The baby stirred, then settled, breath thin but steady. Outside, a voice called, sharp with authority. Open up! Caleb cracked the door an inch. Cold rushed in, carrying sweat and smoke and men who hadn't slept. Deputy Rojas stood there now, hat off, jaw set. Two of Matilda's men flanked him, hands near their belts. This has gone far enough, Rojas said. I'm ordering you to stand aside. Caleb met his eyes. On whose paper? Rojas hesitated. Long enough. One of the men leaned forward. You deaf! Caleb shut the door and slid the bolt home. The wood thudded into place like a gavel. Inside, a child whimpered. Lucas lifted a hand without turning. The sound died. Rojas's voice came through the door, lower now. I can't hold them, he said. They'll make it violent. They already did, Caleb answered. A fist slammed the door. The bolt held. Boots scuffed. Someone laughed, brittle. Burn it, a voice said. Caleb's grip tightened on the lantern handle. Amos stepped up beside him. This house is open, he said, voice steady. It is not yours. Outside, Matilda's voice cut through the noise, calm as winter water. No fires, she said. Not yet. Silence followed, the kind that waited. Caleb breathed. Once. Twice. From the back, Evelyn spoke. "They're testing," she said. "They want you to break." Caleb nodded. "I won't." She met his gaze. "Then let me talk." Caleb shook his head. "Not yet." Time crawled. Snow whispered against glass. The stove ticked. A bell rang down the street. One, then two, summoning witnesses under the lie of duty. The door opened again, slow this time. Rojas slipped inside, breath fogging, hands empty. He shut it behind him and leaned back against the wood. "They're gathering," he said. "Church steps. Boone's there." Caleb asked, "Do you have it?" Rojas nodded. "Pike's statement. Sacks from Crown Storehouse. The route they used to dump the powder upstream." "Good," Caleb said. Rojas looked past him to the children. "You know what they'll say?" Caleb didn't pretend otherwise. "They'll say kidnapping, assault, obstruction." "And the lie," Rojas added. Caleb's jaw set. "We don't lead with that." Rojas frowned. "They'll use it." "Yes," Caleb said. "Later." Outside, voices swelled, the sound of a crowd finding its feet. Amos opened the side door a hand's width and looked out. "They're coming," he said. "Now." Caleb lifted the lantern and stepped onto the threshold. The steps were packed with men and women in coats, faces half lit by torches. Judge Boone stood near the front, hat pulled low. Matilda Crown was a pace behind him, perfectly placed to be seen and not touched. Caleb raised the lantern. "You want to hear the law," he said. "Then hear it from me." Boone cleared his throat. "Mr. Marrow," Caleb cut him off. "I bought time," he said. 24 hours. On paper you respect." Murmurs rippled. Matilda's eyes flicked, sharp. She hadn't expected that. Caleb went on. "In that time the water will speak." A laugh came from the back. "Water don't talk." Caleb didn't look. "It kills cattle," he said. "It sickens children. It smells like metal." Boone shifted. "This is not the forum." "Then make one," Caleb said. "Because you signed the paper that let it happen." The crowd stirred. Someone swore. Matilda stepped forward, smile smooth. "He's desperate," she said. "He lost his home last night." Caleb's chest tightened. He didn't answer. Evelyn moved then, stepping into the light beside him. She took off her spectacles and held them in her hand, her voice carried without shouting. "I taught the children what to say," she said. The sound of it hit the crowd like a dropped plate. Lucas stiffened behind her. Evelyn didn't look back. "I taught them because the truth, spoken wrong, would scatter them. Because paper can take children apart." Boone lifted a hand. "You admit to coaching." "I admit to choosing," Evelyn said, "as any parent would." A murmur ran, different now. Matilda laughed once. "You hear that?" she said. "A confession." Evelyn met her eyes. "And I'll give you another," she said. "You poisoned the creek." Matilda's smile thinned. "Prove it." Rojas stepped forward, holding Pike's paper high. "I can." He read, clear and slow. "Arsenic, roots, dates, Names. The crowd leaned in. Torches bobbed. Boone's face drained. This requires review. Matilda's hand lifted. One of her men moved. Caleb stepped in front of Evelyn without thinking. The lantern swung, light flaring. Lucas's voice cut through, raw. Stop! Everyone looked. Lucas walked forward until he stood beside Caleb. He swallowed. His hands shook. He held them still. I said she killed our pa, he said. I didn't see that. The crowd murmured again, louder. Lucas kept going. I said it because if I didn't, they'd take my brother. They'd take my sisters. They'd take Noah. Matilda seized it. You see, she said. A lie. Lucas nodded. Yes, he said. And here's the part I didn't lie about. He turned to the crowd. The water smelled like coins. The cows fell first. Men came with papers the next day. They bought land cheap after. Silence fell, heavy. Rojas held up the bottle. It matches. Boone looked at Matilda, at the crowd, at the ground. Matilda's voice sharpened. This is mob justice. Caleb spoke. This is witnesses. A shout went up, another, the sound of anger finding a shape. Matilda stepped back. Her men shifted. One reached for his gun. Caleb moved without thinking, stepping into the line. The lantern swung. Glass shattered. Flame leaped. Snow hissed as it hit fire. Someone screamed. Amos rang the church bell hard, once, twice, again, calling eyes, calling order. Rojas drew his weapon and aimed it at the man with the gun. Stand down, he said. Federal investigation. The words landed like a weight. Matilda looked around. For the first time, there was nowhere to stand that didn't move. Caleb felt the heat on his hand where the lantern had broken. He didn't pull away. I'm not done. The thought steadied him. Rojas turned to Boone. You're relieved, he said. Pending inquiry. Boone sagged. Matilda's face went pale. She opened her mouth. Caleb spoke first. You bought time with fire, he said. I bought it with land. Now the water takes the rest. Men moved. Hands reached. Iron clicked. Matilda didn't fight when they took her. She looked at Caleb once, cold and bright. This isn't over. Caleb nodded. I know. Inside the church, Noah cried, then quieted. Caleb turned back to the door and stood there, burned hand and all, as snow fell and the town learned how quickly paper could tear. The town didn't cheer. It leaned forward, the way men do when they realize the ground under them might move. Matilda Crown stood with her wrists held by iron now, posture straight, chin high. The ruby ring caught torchlight one last time before a deputy slid it off and dropped it into a pouch. The sound it made, metal on leather, was small. Final. Rojas handed Pike's paper to another deputy. Secure the wells, he said. All of them. Rope and seal. No one drinks from Crown water. A murmur rippled. Somebody crossed himself. Caleb wiped snow over the burn on his hand. It stung, then dulled. He welcomed the dull. Inside the church, Evelyn set Noah back near the altar and checked his breathing again. Counted again. The baby quieted, a soft snuffle, then sleep. Lucas hovered at her shoulder. Is it done? Evelyn didn't answer. She looked past him to the door, where Caleb stood with his back to the room, shoulders squared. "It started," she said. Outside, Boone was arguing with a man who had never argued with him before. "You can't just—" Rojas cut him off. "I can," he said. "And I am." Boone's hat came off. He ran a hand through thinning hair and stared at the ground like it might tell him what to do next. A rider came hard down the street, reins snapping. He pulled up short and swung down. "Marshal office up north," he said, breath fogging. "They're sending men." Rojas nodded. "Good." Matilda laughed then, sharp and brief. "You think they'll keep you warm," she said to Caleb. "They'll freeze you out and forget you." Caleb turned. He met her eyes. "They'll remember the water." She smiled without warmth. "Water forgets." "Not this time," Caleb said. They took her away. The crowd parted. The space she left behind felt colder. Amos closed the church door and slid the bolt. The sound landed soft. Caleb leaned against a pew and sat. He hadn't noticed the shake in his legs until then. He set his burned hand on the wood and breathed through his nose. "I paid for time." The thought came back, steadier now. It stayed. Evelyn came to him. She didn't ask permission. She sat on the pew beside him and pressed a clean cloth to his hand. Her fingers were sure, practical. "Thank you," she said, quiet. Caleb nodded. He didn't trust his voice yet. Lucas stood in front of them, hat in his hands. He stared at the floor. "I told a lie," he said. Caleb looked up. "You told one to keep breathing," he said. "Then you told another to stop it." Lucas swallowed. "Which one counts?" Caleb thought of winter, of paper, of water. "The one that costs you," he said. Lucas nodded once like he'd been handed a rule he could carry. Rojas opened the door again and stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. "They're sealing Crown's storehouse," he said. "Found sacks of powder, enough to foul a creek twice over." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "They'll say coincidence." "They can say it to a court," Rojas replied. He looked at Caleb. "About that paper you signed." Caleb's eyes flicked up. "It stands." Rojas shook his head. "Duress," he said. "I copied it." Caleb closed his eyes once. "I don't want it back." Rojas paused. "Why?" "Because it bought time," Caleb said. "And because it's clean to lose something you chose to give." Rojas studied him, then nodded. "You'll be poorer." Caleb shrugged. "I've been poorer." Outside, the bell rang again, this time not as a warning, but as a summons. People came closer. Not torches now. Faces. A woman stepped into the doorway, hat clutched. "Is the water safe?" Rojas answered. "Boil everything," he said. "For now." A man behind her asked, "What about the children?" Silence spread. Caleb stood. He moved to the door and faced them. "They stay together," he said. "Tonight, tomorrow, until someone can say otherwise and mean it." Murmurs, a nod, another. Ada Klein pushed forward, apron still on. "I'll take them," she said. "For supper, for sleep." Evelyn glanced at Caleb. Caleb nodded. "Thank you." Ada looked at the baby. "Lord," she said softly, He's a small one. Noah breathed. They moved the children to the boarding house at dusk, Caleb walking on the outside, lantern in hand. Snow fell light. The street felt different, like it had loosened. At Ada's, stew simmered. Beds waited. Clean blankets smelled of soap. Lucas hesitated in the doorway. "You coming?" Caleb shook his head. "I'll stand watch." Evelyn touched his sleeve. "You don't have to." "Yes," Caleb said. "I do." She studied his face. Then she nodded and went inside with the children. Night settled. Caleb took position across from the boarding house, under an awning that had seen better winters. He leaned the lantern against the post and listened to the town, to the quiet that followed noise. Rojas joined him after a while, collar up. "Marshall'll want statements," he said. "From you, from her." Caleb nodded. "She'll give them." "And you," Rojas added. Caleb smiled, thin. "I already did." Rojas looked at him. "You did more than most." Caleb watched the window where a small shadow moved, then stilled. "Most don't have children sleeping because they chose right," he said. Rojas shifted his weight. "What about Christmas?" he asked. Caleb thought of the sprig above his mantle, now ash. "It already came," he said. Inside, Evelyn sat on the edge of a bed and wrote by lamplight. Her hand moved fast, practiced. She addressed the page with her real name and didn't hide it. When she finished, she folded the letter and set it beside the lamp. "I'm done running." The thought steadied her. Lucas lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. He counted the breaths in the room, the way Caleb had counted Noah's. He fell asleep before he reached 20. Outside, Caleb watched the snow erase tracks. Water ran under ice. Paper lay in pieces. Somewhere up north, men rode. Caleb lifted the lantern and stood where the door would open into him, just in case. The cold eased by degrees, not kindness. Caleb felt it first in his burned hand, the ache shifting from sharp to deep. He flexed his fingers once, then left them still. Dawn slid up behind the roofs, pale and careful, like it didn't want to be blamed for what the night had done. Rojas came back with a folded telegram. He handed it over without ceremony. "Marshall's men are riding," he said. "They'll want order, statements, timelines." Caleb nodded. "They'll get them." Inside the boarding house, the children slept in a line like dropped commas, breaths rising and falling out of time. Noah lay nearest the stove, red thread bright against his wrist. Evelyn sat at the table with ink and paper, shoulders squared, spectacles mended again with twine. She looked up when Caleb stepped in. "They'll ask about the ridge," she said. Caleb didn't sit. "They'll ask about everything." Lucas stirred at the sound of his name. He pushed up on his elbows, eyes already awake. "I'll say what I said." Evelyn's hand paused over the page. "You'll say what you saw," she corrected. "Nothing more." Lucas's jaw tightened. "That's what I did." Caleb leaned against the wall. "You added a step," he said. "One you didn't see." Lucas's eyes flicked to him, then away. "It made them listen." "It did," Caleb said, "and it almost let her walk." Silence settled. The stove ticked. Evelyn folded the paper and set it aside. "The lie kept them together," she said. That matters. Caleb met her gaze. So does what breaks it. Lucas sat up fully now. He rubbed his face hard with both hands, like he could wipe something off that way. If I fix it, he said, they take us. Caleb shook his head. Not now. Lucas looked up. How do you know? Caleb didn't answer with words. He lifted the bottle Rojas had brought back from the office. Water sealed and labeled. He set it on the table beside Pike's statement. Because water doesn't care what you say, he said. It keeps records. Rojas stepped in behind him. Crown's storehouse is sealed, he said. We found ledgers, names, payments that don't match harvests. Evelyn's pen moved again. Then we don't lead with the ridge, she said. We lead with the creek. Rojas nodded. And the children. Caleb looked at Lucas. You tell them the part that costs you, he said, not the part that saved you. Lucas swallowed. He nodded once. I'm done hiding. The thought landed heavy and stayed. The marshal's men arrived near noon. 3 riders, dusted white, faces set. They dismounted in the street and didn't remove their hats. They asked for coffee first, then paper. Statements went down slow. Caleb spoke plain. Where he was, what he saw, what burned. He didn't dress it up. Evelyn spoke next. She gave her full name. She named the school she'd taught at, the concert hall she'd played once, the charge that had followed her west like a shadow. She named the choice she'd made to lie for children who would have been split by morning. I chose wrong, she said. And then I chose again. The marshal wrote and did not interrupt. Lucas stood when his turn came. He set his hat on the table and put his hands flat on the wood so they wouldn't shake. I said she killed our pa, he said. I didn't see that. A murmur moved the room. I saw the water, Lucas went on. I smelled it. I saw cows fall. I saw men come with papers after. I saw my sister's cough. He looked at the marshal. I lied to live. I'm telling this to stop it. The pen scratched. The room breathed. Outside, someone rang the church bell once. Habit, not warning. By late afternoon, the wind turned. It carried a cleaner cold. Snow lifted and set again like the land was smoothing its own wrinkles. Caleb stepped out and watched the sky. He thought of the creek under ice, moving anyway. At dusk, a runner came from the edge of town. They found another well, he said. Same powder. Rojas smiled without humor. Patterns talk. Matilda Crown sat alone in the office when they went to fetch her, posture still straight, eyes still bright. She didn't fight. She didn't plead. You're making a mistake, she said to Caleb as they passed. Caleb stopped. He met her eyes. You made it first. She tilted her head. You'll lose everything. Caleb thought of the house, of Ash, of a baby breathing. I already did, he said. Night came down gentle, like it didn't want to disturb anything else. Ada served stew again. Bread. Apples saved for Sunday. Someone found a scrap of ribbon and tied it to a broom handle by the door. Evelyn stood with the children and sang a carol under her breath, not loud enough to ask permission. Her voice was thin but steady. The words were old. They carried anyway. Noah slept through it. Lucas watched Caleb across the room. He lifted his chin, a question. Caleb nodded once. Later, when the room thinned and lamps went low, Evelyn came to the door with her coat on. "They'll call me back east," she said. Caleb didn't look away from the street. "Yes. And you'll be dragged with me," she added. Caleb shrugged. "I've been dragged before." She studied him. "Why?" Caleb thought of the sprig that had burned, of the bell, of the night he'd heard breathing where none should be. "Because the Lord keeps handing me doors," he said, "and I'm tired of pretending I don't see them." She smiled, small. "Christmas," she said. "Every year," Caleb replied, "if you're paying attention." The marshal's men posted watches. The town slept like it had been given a reason. Caleb took the lantern and stood where the boarding house door would open into him, just in case. Snow whispered. Water moved. Somewhere, paper tore. Morning came with a sound like cloth tearing. It was the wind, catching on something that wasn't there anymore. Caleb knew before he saw it. They stood at the edge of the rise where his land used to begin. Charred posts leaned like broken teeth. The roof had collapsed inward, ash frozen into ridges. The chimney still stood, stubborn as a scar. Someone had been careful. They hadn't burned the barn. Just the house, just the place with the table and the sprig and the chair that faced the door. Rojas cursed once and took his hat off. "They wanted you unrooted," he said. Caleb didn't answer. He walked the line where the wall had been and stopped where the mantel had fallen. He knelt and sifted ash with his burned hand until he found the iron hook where the lantern had hung. He set it aside. "I didn't keep it." The thought came sharp, then eased. Back in town, word traveled faster than smoke. By noon, men stood in knots, arguing in low voices. Women crossed the street when Crown's name was spoken, then crossed back to listen. Evelyn packed without folding. She tied Noah tighter to her chest with the sling and checked the red thread twice. Lucas watched her hands. "They did this because of me," he said. Evelyn didn't look up. "They did it because paper hates witnesses." Caleb stepped in the doorway. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. "They'll say you set the fire," Lucas said. Caleb nodded. "They will." Rojas appeared behind him. "And they'll say it loud," he added. "Crown's people already are." Evelyn stopped packing. "Then we don't wait." Rojas shook his head. "We wait just enough." He spread papers on the table. Ledgers. Pike's statement. A map of the creek with marks where powder had been dumped. He tapped the page. "We move this to the county seat. Tonight." Caleb looked at the children. At Noah's breathing. "They won't let us." Rojas met his eyes. "That's why you don't come as yourself." By dusk, the town had shifted again. 2 wagons stood ready behind Ada's boarding house, one loaded with sacks of grain, the other with crates marked soap. Under the soap were papers wrapped in oilcloth. Amos came with a blessing and a mule that knew the road. "For the hill," he said, "not the street." Caleb took the reins. He'd hauled heavier loads. He knew the turns by feel. Matilda Crown watched from the office window as they rolled out. Guards posted, eyes narrowed. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. At the ridge, the wind cut. Snow blew sideways. The mule leaned into it and kept going. Lucas rode beside Caleb, silent. He stared at the dark ahead. "If they catch us," he said. Caleb finished it for him. "They'll split you." Lucas nodded. "Then we don't get caught." Halfway down the far slope, a shot cracked. Wood splintered. The mule screamed and stumbled. Caleb hauled the reins and dragged the wagon sideways, tipping crates into Titsatsun, the snow. Soap burst open, white bars skittering like bones. "Down!" Rojas shouted. Another shot, then another. Caleb moved without thinking. He cut the mule free and slapped its flank. It bolted, taking noise with it. He shoved the wagon brake and kicked it loose. The wheels locked. The wagon slid and stopped. Men shouted from the trees. Caleb took position behind the axle. He fired once, not to hit, to answer. Evelyn crouched with the children behind the slope. Noah pressed tight. She counted breaths again. Counted again. "I chose this." The thought steadied her. Rojas crawled up beside Caleb. "They're her men," he said. "She wants the papers." Caleb nodded. "They're not getting them." He grabbed a crate and smashed it open. Soap bars flew. Beneath them, oilcloth gleamed. He shoved the bundle into Lucas's hands. "Run," he said. "Down the cut. Don't stop." Lucas hesitated. He looked at Evelyn, at Caleb. Caleb met his eyes. "Now!" Lucas ran. A shot tore the air where he'd been. Snow puffed. Lucas didn't look back. Caleb fired again, closer this time. A man cursed. Someone fell. Rojas lobbed a rock and drew fire. "Go!" he shouted to Evelyn. She moved fast and low. Children pressed into her coat, slipping into the cut where the land fell away and hid them. Caleb stayed until the last breath counted. Then he pulled back, sliding on ice, teeth clenched. They regrouped in a stand of scrub where the wind broke. The night closed in. Lucas sat shaking, papers safe. Evelyn checked Noah. The baby cried once, then quieted. Rojas bled from the scalp, not much. "We keep moving," he said. Lights flared on the ridge, lanterns searching. Caleb took the iron hook from his pocket and handed it to Lucas. "If they ask who kept the light," he said, "tell them it was yours." Lucas nodded, jaw set. They moved until the town lights were gone and the creek took over, a dark sound under ice. Behind them, Matilda Crown stood at her window and watched the ridge burn with men and lanterns. She didn't smile. "Find them," she said to no one. Ahead, the road bent toward a place where paper had to travel farther to lie. Caleb walked into the dark, burned hand closed around nothing, and kept going. They reached the culvert before dawn, where the road dipped and the creek ran tight and fast under ice. The sound of it filled the hollow, constant, impatient. Rojas waved them down into the reeds. "We wait," he said. "Then we cross." Caleb shook his head. "They'll search the water." "They'll search everything," Rojas replied. "That's why we wait." Evelyn didn't argue. She knelt and set Noah against her chest, loosening the sling just enough to check his breathing. Thin. Steady. She counted to 12 and stopped. Lucas crouched beside her, the oilcloth bundle under his coat. His hands shook until he pressed them into the mud and let the cold bite. "I can't feel my fingers," he said. "Good," Caleb answered. "Means you're still here." Lantern light bobbed along the ridge behind them, far and angry. Voices carried, then broke apart. A horse whinnied. Evelyn reached into her pocket and took out the folded paper she'd kept since the church. The one she hadn't shown Caleb. The one that could have ended his cuffs clean. Caleb noticed the movement. "What's that?" Evelyn didn't look up. "A door." Rojas frowned. "What kind?" "The wrong one," she said. She unfolded it enough for the seal to show. Red, clean, authority. Caleb's jaw set. "That would clear me." "Yes," Evelyn said, "and split them." Rojas inhaled sharply. "You don't know that." "I do," Evelyn replied. "The language is precise. Temporary transfer, emergency custody, paper that moves faster than mercy." Caleb reached for it. She pulled it back. "I won't run behind it anymore," she said. "And I won't hand them a blade." She struck a match against the stone. The flame caught, small and certain. She held the paper over it until the seal curled and blackened, until the words shrank and fell away. Caleb watched it burn. He didn't stop her. The ash drifted down and vanished in the creek. Rojas swore under his breath. "You just killed the cleanest exit." Evelyn met his eyes. "No," she said. "I closed it." They waited until the lanterns thinned, until the ridge went dark. Then they crossed. The water was higher than it looked. It took Caleb's boots and tried to keep them. He leaned into it and found the far bank by feel. Rojas came next, then Lucas, then Evelyn, careful and slow. Noah held high. On the other side, they climbed until the road leveled and the trees opened. The county line lay a mile ahead, marked by a broken post and a prayer nailed crooked. By noon, the sky cleared. Sun on snow cut the eyes. They flagged a wagon and traded soap for a ride. At the county seat, the building smelled of ink and boiled coffee. Men in stiff collars looked up when Rojas laid the papers down. "This is water," he said. "This is poison. This is money." They read. They stopped smiling. A clerk ran for a judge who didn't owe Crown a thing. Hours stretched. Words moved. Signatures landed. By evening, a writ went out. Names followed. Rojas exhaled. "It'll stick," he said. "It has to." Outside, a bell rang. Christmas Eve. Caleb stepped into the cold and leaned against the stone. He closed his eyes. "I should have walked away." The thought cut and passed. Evelyn came out with the children. She didn't touch him. She stood close enough to share heat. "They'll come for us," she said. "Yes," Caleb answered. "And they won't find paper to hide behind." Lights came on across the square. Someone sang off-key. A woman laughed. Lucas looked up at the building, then at Caleb. "Did we do it?" Caleb looked at the sky, clean and hard. "We started it," he said. They found shelter in a room above a store. Clean beds, bread, a sprig of pine nailed to the door. Evelyn wrote another letter by lamplight, name clear at the top. She sealed it and set it beside the Bible someone had left on the table. Outside, water ran under ice, louder now. Caleb stood by the window and watched the street until the last light went out. He held the iron hook in his burned hand and waited for the knock that didn't come. Not yet. The knock came at dawn, measured and patient, like it knew it would be answered. Caleb opened the door before it sounded again. The cold stepped in first, then the men. They wore county coats and carried paper that smelled new. Behind them stood faces Caleb didn't recognize. Clean boots, eyes that didn't belong to the valley. Federal. Rojas stepped out from the stairwell, already buttoning his collar. "You're late," he said. The taller man smiled without humor. "Roads," he replied. "Always water somewhere." Caleb moved aside. He didn't ask for warrants. He'd learned when paper mattered and when it didn't. Inside, Evelyn gathered the children close. She didn't hide them. She placed them where they could be seen. Noah breathed. The men read. They asked questions. They compared ledgers to maps and dates to routes. They listened to Pike's affidavit again and nodded at the words arsenic and upstream. A judge arrived who didn't belong to Crown. He took his hat off inside. "Where is Matilda Crown?" he asked. Rojas answered. "Held, pending transfer." "Good," the judge said. "Bring her." They brought her near noon. She wore the same black coat, no jewelry. Her hands were free. She looked around the room as if it were a place she'd once owned. "You're making a theater," she said. The judge sat. "We're making a record." Caleb stood at the back. He watched the watermarks on the floor from where boots had melted snow into puddles. He listened to the scratch of pen on paper. Matilda spoke when asked. She denied. She smiled. She said coincidence and supply chains and bad winters. She said men blame women when they don't understand business. The judge listened. Then he turned to Lucas. Lucas stepped forward. He didn't look at Matilda. He looked at the table. "I told a lie," he said. Matilda's mouth curved. "You see?" Lucas went on. "I told it to stay together. I'm telling this to finish it." He described the creek again. The smell. The cows. The papers that came after. He pointed at the map where the powder had been dumped. He named the storehouse. The judge nodded. "Thank you." Evelyn took her turn. She didn't raise her voice. She named contracts, clauses, the way emergency custody traveled faster than truth. She named the charge that had chased her west, and the judge who had signed it without reading. "I burned a paper," she said, "because it would have split children." Matilda laughed softly. Confession upon confession. The judge wrote. He looked up. "Sometimes," he said, "law catches up to mercy." Rojas placed the charcoal copy of Caleb's transfer on the table. "Duress," he said, "signed under threat to minors." The judge studied it. Noted. Matilda's eyes flicked. For the first time, they searched. Caleb was called last. He stepped forward and felt the room tilt. He steadied it with his breath. "I signed away my land," he said, "to buy time." The judge raised a brow. "Why?" Caleb thought of the lantern hook in his pocket, of the door he stood in front of. "Because time keeps children alive," he said. Silence held. Then the judge nodded once. "Matilda Crown," he said, "you are remanded on charges of poisoning a public waterway, fraud, and coercion. Your assets are frozen pending investigation." Men moved. Iron clicked. Matilda's composure cracked. Not loud, not ugly, just a blink too slow. "You think this ends me," she said to Caleb as they took her. Caleb met her eyes. "No," he said. "It ends this." She smiled thin. "Water forgets." Caleb shook his head. "It keeps score." They took her out. The room breathed again. The judge turned to the children. "There will be questions," he said, "and care." He turned to Caleb. "Temporary guardianship," he added, "pending review." Caleb nodded. He didn't smile. Outside, bells rang. Not just one. The town gathered without being called. Word traveled faster when it wasn't afraid. Rojas stood beside Caleb on the steps. "You did it." Caleb watched the street. "We started it." Rojas grinned. "That's doing." A woman pressed bread into Evelyn's hands. A man offered a coat. Someone tied a green ribbon to the doorpost. Evelyn stood in the light and let it happen. She bowed her head once, not to the people but to the season. That night, they ate in a room with a window that looked onto the square. Candles burned low. The children slept in a pile, boots by the wall. Caleb sat with his burned hand wrapped and his back to the door. "I'm still here." The thought didn't hurt. Later, when the town quieted, Rojas came with news. "The marshal wants you to testify up north," he said to Evelyn. "Soon." She nodded. "I'll go." "And you," he said to Caleb. Caleb shrugged. "I'll stand." Lucas sat up at the word. "We going to leave?" Caleb shook his head. "We'll move when we have to." Lucas lay back down, satisfied. Outside, snow fell again, light and clean. Caleb lifted the lantern and hung it by the window. He watched its glow push back the dark and thought of doors and the choice to stand in them. Somewhere beyond the square, water ran free of poison, under ice, telling the truth to anyone who listened. Christmas morning did not arrive with trumpets. It came with frost on the glass and a pale strip of light sliding across the floor. Caleb woke in the chair by the door, lantern cold in his hand. His burned fingers ached, slow and deep, the way things do when they've stopped getting worse. For a moment he listened, counting without thinking. One breath. Another. Noah slept. That was enough. Evelyn stood at the small table, sleeves rolled, cutting bread into even pieces. She worked the way trained hands always did. No wasted motion, no pause for doubt. When she saw Caleb stir, she nodded once. Not greeting, confirmation. "They'll come for statements again," she said. "Not today." Caleb stood and rolled his shoulders. "Good." Lucas sat on the floor, tying and untying the red thread at Noah's wrist, careful not to pull too tight. The younger children watched, like it was a lesson worth learning. "Why red?" one of them asked. "So you don't lose what matters," Lucas said. Caleb took that in and said nothing. Outside, the square was quieter than it had been in months. No riders, no shouting, just people moving with a little more space between their shoulders and their fear. Rojas knocked once and came in without waiting. He carried a small bundle wrapped in paper. "From the judge," he said. Inside was a document with a different seal. County, temporary guardianship, clean language, narrow but real. Caleb read it twice. He handed it back. "Put it somewhere dry." Rojas smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. He lingered by the door. Crown's assets are frozen, he added. Wells are closed, the creeks being flushed. Evelyn exhaled through her nose, slow. And the orphan train. Rojas shook his head. Cancelled. For now. Lucas's shoulders dropped like he'd been carrying a pack he hadn't known how to set down. Later they walked. Not far. Just around the square. People nodded. A woman crossed herself. A man tipped his hat to the children, then thought better of it and tipped it to Caleb. At the edge of town, Ada waited with a key and a look that dared anyone to argue. House behind mine, she said. It leaks, but it's standing. Caleb took the key. It was warm from her hand. The house was small. 2 rooms. A stove that worked if you coaxed it. Windows that let in more light than wind. Caleb set to work without being asked. He fixed the latch. He blocked the draft with rags. He built a cradle from scrap and rope and tested it with his weight until it didn't move. Evelyn watched, then joined him, handing tools without comment. When she sang, it was barely there. A carol that knew how to wait. Noah slept through it. By noon, the table held what the town had given. Bread, apples, a jar of honey with the lid bent but sealed. Someone had left a Bible with a note pressed inside. For whoever needs it most. Caleb didn't open it. He set it by the window. They ate. Slow. Together. After, a knock came. Softer this time. A clerk from the judge's office stood on the step. He cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, he said, there will be a hearing. Evelyn nodded. I know. You'll need counsel. I'll bring my own, she replied. The clerk hesitated. And the children. Caleb stepped forward. They stay. The clerk looked at the paper in his hand, looked at Noah's face. For now, he said. When the door closed, the room held its breath. Lucas broke it. You're going to leave. Evelyn met his eyes. I'll go so I can come back. Lucas looked to Caleb. Caleb nodded. I'll be here. Lucas swallowed. Promise. Caleb didn't speak. He picked up the lantern hook from the mantel and screwed it into the beam by the door. He hung the lantern and lit it. The light stayed. That night, snow fell clean and quiet. The children slept in a row, boots lined neat. Noah breathed, red thread bright. Caleb sat with his back to the door, lantern glow warming the room. Evelyn wrote one last letter, folded it, and set it beside the Bible. She paused, then added a second note, shorter, steadier, and slid it into Caleb's hand. He didn't read it. He put it in his pocket. Outside, bells rang once, then stopped. Caleb closed his eyes. I didn't walk away. The thought didn't feel like a wound anymore. He opened them and watched the light hold, knowing the road ahead would ask again, and that he would answer the same way. The door stayed closed. The family stayed together. For now.